It's time for Daniel in the Deacons Den with Deacon Dan Breyer. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Deacon Dan.
Good morning, Ron. Good morning, Dave. Happy Wednesday.
Yeah.
Happy Wednesday to you, brother.
It's already Hump Day. The week is going fast. There's so many things going on. But today is the feast of Saint Hippolytus.
I'm glad you said that because you hear it. I've always said Saint Hippolytus, and then I've heard Saint Hippolytus or something like that. And I'm thinking, have I been saying it wrong all these years? So I'm glad to hear you say that.
When it comes to pronunciations, you'll probably hear it said 1,000 different ways, like most words. But that's how I've always heard it said.
I just say things fast, and then that way nobody knows,
Exactly, or just put it in writing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He's a unique saint to celebrate for a lot of different reasons. Earlier, a little while ago, you were talking about Alfred Hitchcock, and how it was kind of at the end of his life when he turns back to the faith. That's kind of what happened with Hippolytus. He was a 3rd century saint. He was actually born in the 2nd century. And he was a priest, but when Pope Calixtus was elected as Pope, Hippolytus opposed him. He thought that he was not conservative enough. He was not happy about the fact that the church was allowing people who were renowned big sinners to come back into the faith after reconciliation. And it kind of went on from there. But eventually what he did is he got a faction of people to vote for him as Pope, and he became the first of what we call the anti-popes, which was a guy who was claiming to be Pope, but not really legitimately elected. And there were 2 popes at the same time. And this went on for quite some time, actually, through a couple of papacies. And so he was kind of seen as a heretic and an outsider of the church. But at the same time, he continued to write, to profess the faith, to teach kind of conservative Orthodox Catholic teaching. And eventually, he and Pontian were both exiled, and he turned around and he repented of his claims to be the Pope, and he continued to preach the faith and became really a great man. Well, he was really throughout his life. He was just kind of misguided, but he really made a turnaround at the end, and then he was martyred. And so I think he's a good example, a good reminder to us that, God doesn't write us off if we make some bad choices, some wrong choices along the way, and that in the end, he was able to bring himself back into a meaningful way in the faith. And I think one of the ways that Hippolytus is kind of most known today, and most people don't even know this, is when we're at Mass and the priest is praying Eucharistic Prayer II. And that's the one that starts, "You are holy, you are indeed holy, O Lord, the fount of all holiness." Mm-hmm. That prayer, that Eucharistic prayer, was actually written by Saint Hippolytus.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Now, there are some disputes, like it is in one of his books, there are disputes as to whether he actually physically wrote it himself or it was passed down to him to write in the book. So we'll let the scholars figure that out. But the bottom line is that same Eucharistic Prayer II has been preserved for 1,700 years. And it was appeared in one form. So if you look this up online, if you Google it, it's kind of fascinating because there are some websites that will put like Eucharistic Prayer II next to the writing of Hippolytus. You can compare them side by side. And some of those phrases are exactly the same as they were prayed 1,700 years ago.
Wow.
So it's kind of neat, really.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
So, yeah, point of trivia about Saint Hippolytus today. I think he's worthy of our veneration and our prayers today.
Mm-hmm. And we are so blessed not only by your ministry, but all of our deacons. And I understand there's something exciting coming up for our deacon candidates in a couple of weeks.
There is. We actually, in 2 weeks, will be having what is called the Canonical retreat for permanent deacon candidates. So canon law requires that any man who is on the brink of being ordained in the priesthood or the permanent diaconate is required to have an intensive retreat of at least 5 days. And so this is actually scheduled for the last week of August, and ordination is on September 13th at Rosary Cathedral. So it's just a couple weeks beforehand. And so those the 13 men who are scheduled to be ordained in September will go to the Maria Stein Retreat Center in Maria Stein, Ohio, and they'll be there from August the 25th through the 29th on retreat. And the director for the retreat will be Monsignor Ted Oxley. And, Monsignor Oxley is the pastor at St. Michael Gibsonburg and at St. Mary in Millersville. But at the time when these men entered formation, he was the vicar for clergy. So he was kind of their first point of contact. Deacon Hal Welsh was in my position at that time. And so Monsignor Oxley will be running that retreat, presenting conferences each day to prepare them for their ordination in September. So during that retreat time, they'll have time for conferences, daily Mass, daily Eucharistic adoration. There is silent time to walk the grounds. They'll have individual conferences with Monsignor Oxley. They'll share meals together, and really just an opportunity to be during that week. It's very low-key, but it's an opportunity to just sort of reflect a little bit on what am I about to get into here, I'll never forget, I think it was just after the Canonical retreat or maybe a few days before ordination that I thought to myself, I woke up one morning thinking, oh my gosh, I only have like 3 days left of being a layman. I'm going to be clergy for the rest of my life. What's going on here? And that's their opportunity to really think about that and what that means in their lives, because we go through this ontological change at ordination. So in general, all of the active permanent deacons in the Diocese of Toledo are expected and required to have a minimum retreat of 3 days each calendar year. So some will go to like a preached retreat that we organize locally. Some go off somewhere for a planned retreat, like at Franciscan University in Steubenville. Some will rent a hermitage in the area and spend 3 days away in silence. I always go to retreat at Gethsemane Abbey in Kentucky for a week. Pray the Liturgy of the Hours with the monks and walk the grounds and spend the week in silence. So there are lots of different ways to do retreats, but the idea here is when it comes to the life of a deacon, at some point you've got to just check out from the crazy life you're living and your family and your job and so forth, away from what we usually do, and spend some time with God. Build the relationship with Him so that we have more to give when we return. I remember when I was a teenager, I was working in a variety store, and I had a boss who I asked him for the weekend off because I was going to a retreat. And he just kind of laughed. He said, yeah, you can have the weekend off. He said, I don't understand you Catholics. You guys are always retreating but never advancing. And the interesting thing is he obviously completely missed the point.
Yeah,
right. Yes, we do retreat. It is part of our Catholic culture, but the reason why we retreat is so that we can advance.
Amen.
The retreat time is where we can draw our energy from, and so we talk about that balance between action and contemplation. We have to have time for prayer and retreat to give us the energy that it takes to do the active ministry. And so that's really what we're trying to do with the 13 candidates, is to give them that opportunity to grow in their faith so that they have something to give after ordination. So I would ask for our listeners to pray for our 13 candidates. They're right down crunch time. Ordination is 1 month from today. And so they have this canonical retreat and the ordination, and they're all going to be deacons a month from today. So we ask for prayers for all of them.
Love it. Thank you, Deacon Dan. Look, we're 60 years, less than 60 years since the restoration of the permanent diaconate, and that process continues to evolve into a stronger and stronger education for our deacons in our diocese in particular. So thankful for you overseeing that program and the wonderful men who move forward on it after they're called to do so. Thank you, Deacon Dan.
You're welcome.